Hello and welcome to episode 151 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how was your holiday break? Were you up to anything fun?
Yeah. Restful and stressful in equal measure. I think that happens at Christmas. You know, you just need to watch their Christmas special from a year or so ago to see that. It was good. I'm pumped for this new year. Lots of ideas, some coming to fruition. Some ideas from last year slowly coming to fruition after some stumbling blocks and some barriers that were put in the way, which honestly spilt into the first week of January. But as of today, things are resolved, which I'm very, very happy about. How was your overall holiday? Then let's get into our plans a little bit for this year coming.
Yeah, I had a great break. Of course, having a little one in the house every year is different because different levels of understanding, and it's a ton of fun, though. I really enjoyed it. And also, having Noah, I was more driven and inspired to spend more time with holiday movies this year, especially the family-friendly ones. So got some holiday viewing in as well, which was awesome. I'd say the theme of my projects over the holiday, my tinkering time, if you will, was my Vision Pro and really thinking deeply about my workflows around Vision Pro and how to integrate it more deeply into my everyday life. I've talked before, I use it at work for the most part, and I actually gotten to the point where I just kind of left it at work most of the time and didn't really use it at home. And I wanted to change that up. So thanks to some generous Christmas gifts this year, I've got kind of a little bit of a different carry setup. I got the Belkin bag that came to the Apple store right before Christmas. That was great timing. So I've been able to carry it back and forth more easily. I got the Prism XR Carina stand for my Vision Pro, so it's always charged at home now too, and it's always sitting out. It's not in the case, so it's more easily available. So yeah, I've just been spending more time with my Vision Pro, thinking about, okay, if this is my platform for the future, which is what I want it to be, how can I make this as convenient as possible given the form factor and kind of the trade-offs that you're making there? So that's been fun. I've been spending a lot more time with my Vision Pro at home, even away from the desk, like sitting in bed and playing games and watching things and even doing some editing and writing. So yeah, that was kind of my theme, and it just worked out really well that I was able to do that. And now that I'm back at work, kind of trying to see how it works day to day.
Very cool. Over Christmas, I had the backdrop that I had built for possible YouTube ventures ripped out after a number of issues. And so I had this space which was quite light in comparison to the rest of my cinema room and studio room. And so I've painted it black completely. And it's eliminated reflections, which is fantastic. I also got the Belkin bag for Apple Vision Pro and a stand. I think we need to compare our stands because I got the AVP metal display stand, which I promptly posted on social media as soon as I'd unpacked it and put it together, and it's just so beautifully made and well put together and beautifully designed as well. So that's kind of my Vision Pro story for the holiday. But a big announcement. There's a couple of projects that I've got leading into 2025. What I want to be able to do is be a bit more creative. Not necessarily write about other people's creations, but do something visually stunning. So I've been watching a lot of videos with regard to cinematography, colouring, lighting, and really trying to knuckle down and get the basics right, because I have a immersive camera on its way to me sometime in 2025. We'll find out when, and I'm very, very excited about this prospect. It's all been planned out and very much looking forward to it. But also, I'm really into the wide aspect ratio. I just feel like there's so much that you can do with long exposure, And there's a camera that I mentioned before on the podcast called the Widelux, which was kind of made famous by Jeff Bridges. It was a camera by Panon, which is a Japanese company, not Canon, but Panon. And it's this really cool film long exposure camera where Jeff Bridges kind of made it famous by, he's got a couple books with scenes from on set at various films. But he's got this really cool technique where he does a double portrait. So has someone, posing normally. And then when he says, now, they pull a face. And you get this double portrait. It's very, very cool. And anyway, this new version of the Widelux, after Panon went out of business and their buildings burnt down in Japan a good few years ago, Jeff Bridges is working alongside a German company to bring back the Widelux this year. So I'm really excited for this year. I should mention, started filming with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, which I'll be taking on my travels a little bit later this week as I take a trip to Vienna. So yeah, lots and lots of ideas and lots brewing. But yeah, I definitely want to enjoy these conversations that we have on here. But my other extracurricular output, I want to be more creative this year, for sure.
That's really exciting. The cameras that you're going to be playing with soon and the things that you're going to be able to make. I'll just say right now, expect some of my up next picks this year to be creations by none other than my co-host Sigmund Judge, because I can't wait to see what you make.
I wouldn't go that far, but
Well, I'm looking forward to it. We talk about the technology that's being put out into the world and how accessible filmmaking is and how excited we are to see different creatives get access to, especially when we talk about immersive video. And that's going to be happening sometime this year to someone very close to us, which is really cool to see. And yeah, I'm excited for the coming year. I think it's going to be a great one.
Now, of course, 2025 isn't just about immersive video. I think it's going to be an exciting year for Apple TV. It is long overdue now that we get some new hardware for this year. And whilst there hasn't been a lot of reason beforehand to have it other than our kind of wide expectations for new hardware that's more catered towards the audio video aficionados, I think there's a couple of features that are coming to all Apple devices that may change that story in 2025. Ahead of our recording, we planned to talk about one particular feature and prediction or wish for 2025 when it comes to our Apple TV boxes. I've kind of cheated here, Devon, because I think this is quite vast in its scope. And my prediction is that we're going to see a lot of Apple Intelligence features on Apple TV this year. For good reason, I think. We have certain features right now that feel kind of half-baked and feel like introductions to things that could work really, really well. I'll start with Insight, which is a great feature if you haven't tried it yet. Whilst you're watching an Apple original, you can go down into the video player menu, go onto the Insight tab, and you'll be able to see the actors and the character names as they appear on screen, alongside the soundtrack playing in the background, which then you can add to a playlist through Apple Music. Very, very cool. But it's limited to Apple Originals. Really, it's kind of a few steps behind now what Amazon are doing with their similar feature over on Prime Video. And so I would love to see Apple Intelligence take that to the next level and bring insight and maybe even some more knowledge graphs to not only Apple Originals, but to films and TV shows in the store that work within the video player. And then maybe, in a year from now, we'll see that also come to third-party streamers, even if just through Apple TV channels. The biggest thing for me, though, And where I think Apple Intelligence could really have quite a profound effect on Apple TV this year, should it happen, because again, this is all predictions, right, and wish casting, is the ability for the Apple TV to know who sat in front of it. You can tell me over the holidays if you've experienced this. I think no matter what Apple tried to do in terms of getting people to switch profiles, and I don't think this is necessarily just an Apple issue, people just don't. It's not something that naturally comes to mind when grabbing the remote for people that aren't as obsessed with the platform as you and I are, and many of you listening. Is that something you experienced over the holidays?
I totally did. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, I'm, even as someone who's so aware of the platform features and the importance of profiles, even when I want to watch something, I want as few steps between me and the content, right? The feature where it will select your profile based on which iPhone turns on the TV in the remote app, sometimes it turns into a race between me and my wife to turn on the TV. And so it's just kind of a toss-up, like whose profile is actually going to be activated. And anyway, yeah, I definitely think that anything Apple Intelligence could do there in terms of recognizing who's there and reacting in that way is going to be helpful, because as much work has gone into it and as much as it has gotten better, I think it's still a struggle for people who share their Apple TVs with others.
Well, I mean, the video cameras that we have around our house, right, for CCTV, that kind of thing through Apple, they're able to detect faces, and you know that because when they ring the doorbell, it will tell you who's rang the doorbell right before you get there. And that's all baked into Apple Photos. So I could imagine them bringing that feature and making it fairly available. But maybe it uses Apple Intelligence alongside it, knowing when someone normally logs into a TV, what time, and you know, that kind of thing.
And there's proximity stuff with HomePods as well. I started using an Apple TV in another room of the house over the break that I wasn't using before a lot. And I'm amazed how, for my personal devices, how when I bring up the remote app, it's always the right TV that is selected. Yep. And that feels like magic to me. But once you go outside of just my devices and start getting into other profiles, then it doesn't quite have that same logic. So I think there's a lot of information that could be tied together, I think, to make this more cohesive with, you got to put some kind of AI element into it now because it is 2025. But I think using the information that's available from the cameras, from which phones they're, from proximity to HomePods and, what other devices are floating around the house, you could piece that together into something that I think is more cohesive than what we have now.
Now, there were rumors of the next Apple TV having like a new wireless chip, right, from Apple specifically. And we've been talking for years about ultra wideband and why there's been a failure to use that for proximity, either for finding a remote, which is done via Bluetooth now, or via an Apple Watch. We had some crazy cookie ideas in the past about content being blurred if young eyes were to enter a room where it was an R-rated film or something like that, right, to protect them or pause the show or whatever. So there's lots that they could do when it comes to the viewing experience, not just the logging in experience. And the biggest thing for me from an Apple Intelligence point of view is, if we're not going to get that kind of dream Apple TV box, the Apple TV Pro, we could better use the space that's on the current generation Apple TVs and actually have shows automatically download so that we get consistent bit rates, maybe even better audio and better video for that reason, because you're not just streaming and therefore you're going to get a consistent bit rate, which honestly, since I've been ripping Blu-ray rips and stuff to a server, is something that I feel quite spoilt with these days. I also think, the second part of that, and it's something that I pitched a couple of years ago, and I think as each year passes, makes more and more sense is the ability for an Apple TV to know, firstly, what you're most likely to watch next from your queue and have that download in the background, but download in the background during the day when the power consumption is at its greenest in your area. And that would add to the green initiative. So, I mean, we have a million wishes, but they're the ones that I genuinely think there's a chance that we'll see. I don't know. Do you want to talk about form factors and that kind of thing, Devon?
Well, of course, the dream is the Mac Mini aluminum, but black for Apple TV, right? That's that's what we want.
Sure.
But yeah, I think in terms of form factors, personally, if I'm predicting, just kind of being realistic, I think we're probably going to see new hardware this year that looks pretty similar to what we have now. Depending on the chip, maybe they could make it slightly smaller. I think I've gone back and forth a lot on, is it going to be an A18? Is it going to be an A17? Is it going to be an A17 Pro like we saw in the iPad mini? I think that could dictate maybe some of the limitations on what they do with the form factor. But personally, we've heard lots of, different rumors of ways they could go with the Apple TV. And I'm sure there's prototypes of every different shape and size of Apple TV out there. And if anyone, if we ever get to see anything like that later down the line when it's not so top secret, I'd love to see what they're working on. But personally, I think probably what's going to end up happening is it'll be pretty similar to what we have now. My hope in terms of form factor and hardware is that we can get a version down under $100 in the US, whether that's, the chip or storage or however it is. They've done this a little bit with the line with taking out Ethernet, but then also pushing the high end. If you've got that $99 that's for everybody, then you can really go crazy with the high end one and put that extra storage for the automatic downloads and, the Ethernet and everything else into it. So I'd like to see a little bit more differentiation between those two models, but I don't know that we're going to see any different models, if that makes sense.
So you don't think we might get like an all-in-one small square-like device that could play Apple TV?
Well, I think what you're talking about is the device that I'm calling Apple Home because, we've got hardware, software app all called Apple TV. We need hardware, software app called Apple Home. The smart display that has been rumored, and last we heard may not be coming in the spring like we thought, but I really hope that it is. That's my big pick for this year. My wish is something that I've kind of seen on the horizon for a couple years, but I think this really could be it. And that is a total unification of Apple's home strategy with Apple TV at the center of it. And there's a lot of pieces that I think could come together this year. We've got rumors of new Apple TV hardware, rumors of new HomePod mini hardware with those new wireless chips. We've got the rumors of the smart display that, would be fitting for a kitchen bedside table, kind of where you don't need a full TV. You could have this little smart display to do some of those Apple TV type things. We've also heard rumors about Home OS, which is apparently the operating system that's going to run that smart screen. And it's kind of derivative of tvOS, maybe a subset or somehow related to. So I feel like those are going to really work well together. And for me, at least, the Apple TV has always been the center of my smart home. It's always been the hub and what's run things, but I've always wanted more software, apps, tools on my TV to kind of manage and monitor my smart home. And, we've talked about things like widgets and stuff like that before that would be helpful in that area. But I feel like with all the investment Apple's putting into this smart display and Home OS, I think the Apple TV is going to get some of those benefits. We've also seen a little bit of movement in the Matter standard. Just this week, Apple has committed to adopting and approving any devices that meet the Matter standard automatically are Apple Home approved now, which is awesome for cool. The atmosphere of the smart home. And it really is kind of the promise of what we were given with Matter. And, we want to see that with other, platforms as well. But as people who are so invested in Apple Home, and the home app. I think that's going to be amazing. So yeah, I've just got really good feelings about Apple's home strategy this year, and Apple TV specifically, its place in it. And I just have a feeling that in a year from now, the smart home strategy is going to be more clear. And at least personally, my smart home is going to look quite a bit different than it does right now.
You know what I'm really looking forward to, Devon, is hearing you talk for a good 20 minutes about the color choices for the new HomePod minis.
Yes.
When they do come. Maybe we'll get purple this time round. That'd be kind of cool. I wonder in terms of the HomePod minis and like the muted wireless chips, whether or not we'll finally get surround sound HomePods. Could be what Apple have been waiting for there as well. So I'm excited. I'm going to spring something on you though. And that is the first predictions for this year. 1 point each on this. If there is to be a different form factor of Apple TV, will it be a soundbar? Will it be a stick? Or will it be none of the above?
Ooh. I'm going to go with... You know what? I'm going to go with a soundbar. I'm just going to say, I know it would make a lot of people happy. I don't know how realistic it is, but if they're going to do another form factor, they've got HomePods, they've got Apple TV, why not smush them together into a soundbar? Do you think that's even remotely possible, or are you thinking none of the above?
I'm thinking none of the above, but it's refreshing. We heard about the soundbar, Apple TV, all in one. And I've already voiced my concerns about a product like that, but there's an audience there, so maybe it could happen. But I think what we might see is a camera. And that's going to be my kind of prediction in terms of an Apple TV. I think we might see a third-party camera that interacts directly with it, as opposed to how we tether an iPhone now if we have that expendable income or one floating about, right?
Yeah, I think that seems super likely and something that a lot of people would take good advantage of as well. I think what we can agree on is we're probably not going to see the Apple TV get smaller and take that stick form factor, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's shrinking anytime soon. The only shrinking I think Apple TVs are going to do at any point is the shrinking by the way of Bill Lawrence, Jason Segel, and Brett Goldstein, which of course we'll be recapping the second season of later on in this episode, alongside Thoughts on a Real Pain, one of the gifts that we gave to one another over the holidays. But before all of that, let's talk about this week. Of course, 2025, I feel like each year just rushes off so quickly to full steam ahead. We've, of course, got later this month Sundance Film Festival, and I'm really looking forward to all of that. But right now, as we're recording, John Voorhees and Brendan Bigley of Next Portable Console are at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And, well, there's a variety of different things that we're going to talk about next week once we get everything together and really choose our best TVs and displays and gadgets from this year's event. It's time for us to delve into the strange world of video display technology. And by that, I mean the arms race that is DisplayPort versus HDMI. There seems to be this to and fro constantly. HDMI 2.2, we'd been waiting for it with bated breath, or at least I had been, Devon, because I was really excited to see what was going to be announced and how much of it actually made sense to Apple TV and to myself as a home theatre nerd, and to people that just love home theatres and big tellies. Well, here are the details for what is being called Ultra 96 by the HDMI Foundation. Our friend Rasmus at Flat Panels HD is at CES and has all of the details, so I'll just go through what he's found out and Yeah, pretty mind-blowing stuff. So, HDMI 2.2 is going to allow for up to 96 gigabytes per second of bandwidth for 8K, 16K, VR and more, double that of HDMI 2.1. It's also going to allow for 4K at 240Hz and some variants of 4K 480Hz without signal compression on TVs, which is, I guess, going to be pivotal for whatever the next step is in terms of gaming. And as someone that is getting older and my reflexes aren't as fast as they were, and I'm really feeling it when playing online, I can only imagine how old these 480 hertz refresh rates are going to make me feel. In terms of cinema, of course, because you've got variable refresh rates, that's going to make things interesting. Be interesting to see if James Cameron's like, yeah, I need a scene in 480 hertz, and then I want to go back down to 24 frames per second. Who knows? We've also got improvements here for latency. So the latency indication protocol will improve audio and video synchronization, especially for configurations with a video receiver or a soundbar. I honestly don't see any delay, but I'm guessing this means that when this does come in, we may be able to get some of the effects at home that you can experience in Dolby Cinemas. You know, I talked about it a few months ago, how incredible that setup was in London. And I don't think the technology is there to be able to really reproduce that at home. Maybe this helps in that. What I think the biggest detail in all of this, though, is that we can expect HDMI 2.2 to kind of be put into manufacturers' devices, from home cinema to streamers to everything else, in probably a couple of years' time. Looking at HDMI 2.1 spec when it was announced, it wasn't adopted for probably about 2 years after it was announced, and then really kind of 2.1 just joined everything 4 years later after its announcement. So this is going to be a long journey. One of the biggest things, though, and we have talked about it briefly with the latest Apple TV 4K box, was that whilst hardware can say HDMI 2.1 or HDMI 2.2, there is nothing within that spec that says you have to include support for all of these different things within the spec. It's all optional, which makes it a headache for us when buying a TV or buying an AV receiver and then finding out, oh, actually, the stuff that I really wanted in the spec isn't coming for another year or so, but is going to support the cables. And this is the other interesting thing. The 2.2 HDMI cables, called Ultra 96 cables, are coming later this year, way ahead of any hardware that's really going to take advantage of any of this. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where any of this develops, if it does. The one thing I will say, though, is, you know, in a few years' time, I'm not looking forward to opening up my ceilings to change the cables when, you know, the 16K projectors come. 16K projectors. It's bonkers, Devon, but, you know, you got to embrace the future.
You do, or you at least got to be prepared for it. And that's where what you were saying about the cables being available later this year actually does make sense, because if you're going to buy an HDMI cable for, you know, put in your ceiling, or in my case, in my wall, if I'm going to do that anytime within the next year, I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's one of the 2.2 compatible ones so that I'm ready in the future.
I mean, you say that. The issue with that is, with there not being any hardware, you can't test whether or not there are any faults on the cable until a few years later down the line.
That's true.
So,
yeah, and to me, you know, we read these specs, and it's obviously interesting and good to know what's available in the spec, but what you really want to know is, with the product that you're deciding to buy, or when you're shopping, what feature are you looking for? Do you really want that super high refresh rate? Are you looking for the higher resolutions? What exact features? And then you can kind of narrow down what you're shopping for based on that. But this is going to basically, just take the whole spec to the next level, prepare for the next generation of games and video and content, and really just, I think that we're going to be living with HDMI 2.2 for some time, and it might take some time to see all of its benefits, but they'll come.
One thing I will say, multi-screen, right? If you've got 16K signal, every screen is going to be, super high res. So you're not going to lose anything by watching multi-screen, especially if you've got a big display. So that would be really, really cool. But honestly, some of it's way over my head.
Let's talk about something else over your head, Sigmund. Let's move to app news. Talk about a big update to Theater from Sandwich for Vision Pro, because it got a huge update over the holiday break. And now when I'm in Theater for my Vision Pro, I can look up and I can see a dome, or I could see a planetarium. Those are two new environments that were added to the app that are just striking to spend time in. It also added a couple other new theaters, including a home theater, which is kind of cool. You're sitting on a couch and you can kind of look to your left and right and see a lamp and stuff. And then the Vidiot's Eagle Theater, which has some awesome carpeting. I've not been to California. I've never spent time in this theater, but to get that experience, I think it's really cool. So some great new environments there. Along with those environments, you want some content to take advantage of those new formats. So there's some new curated video content, including full dome and giant screen films from Reef Distribution. You can purchase or rent those within the app. So it's kind of a new way for those creators to also monetize that content as well. And I think they're kind of bringing things in and out, over time and having different things available. So it's curated. It's very cool in that way. In addition to that, the app now has Plex support. So that's like a whole plethora of content that you can now watch in these environments that you couldn't before. So all those DVDs and Blu-rays that you're ripping and watching in super high bit rate now, Sigmund, you can watch those on a dome if you want to.
Yeah, and the Plex support, since that first update, it had another update like a day ago, which just brings better Plex support, allows you to share other people's libraries as well and be able to dip into there. It's so cool. And the videos that Sandwich put together to promote their updates are out of this world. I don't quite know how they do it all. I'd love to know. And, maybe after, honestly, a failed attempt on my part, just life got in the way last year, I'm hoping 2025 we can get Adam from Sandwich on the show this year. So, yeah, incredible work, Devon. Incredible.
It really is. And they're continuing to push into the spatial video space as well. There's a new video coming this month from artist Lila Downs, live from East LA, a music performance that will be available in theater later this month as well. Kind of, I guess, their next spatial video after the talk show live last year, which was an awesome experience. So I'm excited what they do with this live music performance as well. A couple other apps we have to talk about. These aren't for Vision Pro, but they're for streaming live channels and sports on your other devices. This news, I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I'm going to do my best to explain it and save the snark for the end, because this really is just, it's absolutely amazing. Fubo has announced plans to combine its streaming TV offering with Hulu Plus Live TV in a joint company that will be 70% owned by Disney and led by Fubo CEO David Gandler. Fubo and Hulu Plus Live TV will continue to be available as independent services via their own separate apps. And Fubo has signed a new distribution deal with Disney that will allow it to offer a cheaper bundle of the company's sports and entertainment channels, which was a key component of that lawsuit that Fubo filed last year that we talked about. This merger, by the way, marks the end of that lawsuit that Fubo filed against Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery over the planned launch of sports streamer Venue, with the three companies paying Fubo a combined $220 million and Disney loaning the company an additional $145 million. This outcome I mean, there are so many ways I thought this lawsuit could go. You know, I thought the fact that Fubo even got an injunction at all was kind of like, that was like 1% chance type thing.
Sure.
Really incredible. But Fubo just came out so well in this entire thing. I mean, they're like, okay, so you want to launch this streamer. How about instead you buy us?
And I gotta wonder whether or not this is even going to be allowed, Devon. Like that, you know, I'll be ready to bring in the full snark now. Because I've been patiently waiting.
Yeah, unleash the snark.
I just don't think this is going to go ahead. I can't see how this would just, hey, there's this issue. We've put out an injunction and, oh, okay, we're just going to buy our way out of trouble. Isn't that one of the things that we've been talking about all the way through in 2024, anti-competition? This can't be seen as anything but an anti-competitive or anti-competition move by Disney, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. In their press release, they're talking about how this is going to be great for consumers because they're going to have more choices. But yeah, this is consolidation, right? This is like two of the major players in this space. I mean, I guess they'd be able to better compete against YouTube, and maybe that would bring prices down, but I don't really foresee that happening. The prices for these services have been going up and up and up. And I think it's going to lead to some serious confusion for consumers. Now you've got this one company that's kind of owned by Disney, but also run independently with their own thing going. I think it's even going to be publicly traded separately. And it's offering two totally separate, not even just services, but two totally separate series of services, because Fubo has its own offerings. Hulu plus Live TV, I think it might be consolidated into one thing now. I don't think they have multiple plans, but it just seems so confusing. Like, if I'm someone who's looking for one of these services, how am I going to decide what I want, which company to go with? I'm going to sign up through one app, but then I'm going to think that I can access it through this other way. And, you know, then you throw in the Disney bundle as well. And it's just like, this is so confusing. So can I give you my pitch for like the ideal way this actually works out?
Sure.
So I've been thinking a lot about Hulu the past couple of years because it's just been in such a weird space, you know, since Disney took over Fox and then was kind of running Hulu, but only owning 2/3 of it. So they had these weird kind of very like opposing factions, like of whether to make Hulu better or not. Mm-hmm. Now they fully own Hulu, but now they're 70% in with this other thing, which is also tangentially related to Hulu. So here's what I'd love to see if this actually goes through and happens. What I would like to see, and I know people aren't going to necessarily agree with me on this, but just for my own mind and like to be able to understand this and make sense of this whole situation, I think Hulu needs to just be the streaming service, basically the adult geared content, they pick up from ABC and Fox and other companies. And then they also have their Hulu originals, kind of like what Star is basically internationally. And that can just be in the Disney Plus app, like, they've kind of been doing now. Hulu plus Live TV, that can just be Fubo now. Fubo can just be their live TV offering. And then Hulu doesn't have to be this weird kind of middle stepchild kind of thing. It can just be the streaming service that's making these awesome shows, and also carries, by the way, FX, which is series that we really enjoy. And I think if they could simplify it in that way, then it would be a win. But I don't think it's actually going to turn out that way.
Or we just rename Hulu Star and have everything be what it is internationally.
Yeah, I'd be sad to see the Hulu branding go away, but I mean, it's been kind of slowly fading anyway as Disney Plus has kind of become the thing. So, yeah, this is not good for the Hulu brand. This move is not. This is just more confusing, and honestly, I feel bad for like Fubo customers right now who like have no idea what's happening with the future of their service. It's a very convoluted solution to a problem that I think could have been solved much more simply.
It does feel very much, though, with what happened over the holidays with NFL on Netflix and now WWE, which just aired Raw last night at the time of when we were speaking. It does really feel like it's a Disney and Netflix dominated landscape in the streaming world right now. It's going to be interesting to see later on this year whether or not we do see more mergers.
Yeah, mergers, team ups. I mean, anything's kind of game right now, obviously, and we don't know exactly what the regulatory environment's going to look like, over the next year as well, in terms of if this stuff could even get approved. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But if anything interesting happens in the world of Fubo, we'll be sure to let listeners know. Speaking of team ups, there was a really interesting one announced this week between Apple Fitness Plus and workout app Strava. This is a part of every January. Apple does a big roundup of Apple Fitness Plus features coming for the new year, because that's our time where we're reflecting on our health and fitness and making our goals for the year. So it's a great time to get people interested in Fitness Plus. This integration is really interesting. Strava, it's a workout app, but it has that kind of community aspect where you're following people and encouraging people, and you have like your group of folks that you keep up with, and you can even do challenges and stuff like that. A little bit like the social aspect of the Fitness Plus app, but I think say on a bigger scale and cross-platform. But now you can actually share your Fitness Plus workouts to Strava, and it'll have the picture, the description, your stats all in there nice and easily, so you're not having to enter anything manually, which is very cool. Strava users are also going to get access to a 3-month free trial of Fitness Plus if they want to try it. And Apple's actually going to be bringing in some community athletes from the Strava community into Fitness Plus workouts as guests over time. So, yeah, this is a pretty cool collaboration. We did see Apple team up with Anytime Fitness last year, I think is who it was. And so you can see they're reaching out within the fitness community, really trying to make Apple Fitness Plus a service that anyone can use and, is accessible to so many people and integrates with the other parts of people's fitness lives, which is cool to see.
Very, very cool. I saw a video just this week of Crystal Laura at the Apple Fitness Plus studios in LA, which was very, very cool. Every time you get any kind of glimpse into the background there, very, very cool to see. And it's cool to see this like fitness multiverse, that's what I'm going to call it.
I like it.
Coming into fruition. I will say my New Year's goals, they haven't begun yet. I'm not necessarily a January the 1st, right, I'm going to go out and run, because that never quite works out for me. I have to find a moment and then go for it, and I think it's going to be from next week once I start walking around Vienna. But one thing we haven't talked about yet, and it's time to, is Apple TV Plus. The first weekend of 2025 was an eventful one. It marked the first weekend where you didn't need to sign up or anything. You could just go into the TV app and you could watch all of the Apple originals that you wanted. It was marked See for Yourself. Anyone that jumped on it, I think, had a blast. A hell of a lot of promotion for different Apple originals that we really didn't even see much promotion for, including Manhunt over that weekend, which is very, very cool to see. And so whilst we dip in every week and keep up, I think there's a lot of shows and a lot of films that people had no idea even existed that they got to enjoy over that weekend. 2025, though, is looking like an exciting year for Apple Originals. And whilst we don't have any new release news to set off the year, of course, we've got the exciting upcoming debuts of Severance, Prime Target, The Studio, and so many others. I wanted to talk about the Apple Originals that we're looking forward to the most, both in terms of Apple Original films and series.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before, the 2025 slate is just jam-packed. There's so much cool stuff coming up, but the one, if I had to pick just one Apple original that I'm absolutely just laser focused on, looking forward to, I can't wait to hit play on it the second I get access to it, it has to be The Gorge, starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. Mm-hmm. Ever since I saw the trailer for that film, I've just felt something inside of me like I need to see this movie. And so we don't have too long to wait. It's coming next month. And even though it's early in the year, I just have this feeling it's going to be a highlight for me this year. And I really can't wait to see it. That's the one Apple original this year that above anything else, all the ones that I am excited for, that's the one I'm most excited for.
In terms of series,
I think probably Dope Thief, which we're getting again very soon as well. Brian Tyree Henry is an actor that I very much enjoy. And so I think that one is probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most in terms of series. It's got Ridley Scott involved as well. So yeah, I think that one's going to be awesome. So that's for me, the film and the show I'm looking forward to most. What about you?
I think in terms of film, F1, there's been so much hype around F1. And of course, some of my favorite filmmakers, especially behind what I think was really the highlight when it came to theatrical plays following the pandemic, Top Gun Maverick. Lots of people behind that same film dealing with the cinematography and reconstructing cameras, and I'm really looking forward to any behind the scenes documentaries we get. And please, I'm hoping we're going to get some kind of feature length documentary on the making of this film with Brad Pitt, because the whole venture just seems out of this world. Of course, collaboration between Warner Brothers and Apple Original Films. So I'm really looking forward to that. In terms of series, one that we've already got a glimpse of, The Studio, with Seth Rogen and Ike Barinholtz, who is kind of like his buddy, second in command, it looks to be in the trailer. But just an all-star cast. This is, of course, about a desperate for celebrity approval studio executive who's newly hired after his mentor is fired from that exact role. And it's got people like Martin Scorsese in there, Chase V. Wonders, Catherine Hahn, who I really, really cannot wait for. As we've mentioned many, many times before, the main character's name is Matt, which always gives me a chuckle. But I just think the creative team, including Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen and Peter Hayek and Alex Gregory alongside Frida Perez, just a great cast. It looks fantastic. It made me chuckle just in the trailers. And I think it's going to be a standout this year. And then the show that we know next to nothing about, and that is Wicaro from Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan. And whilst we know it's filmed and I think pretty much done, we don't know a lot other than the fact that it's set in Albuquerque, much like Breaking Bad's spin-off film El Camino and Better Call Saul, and it's going to star Rhea Seehorn, who played Kim Wexler in the latter. So I'm really, really excited for that. I think that's going to be a standout as well. And then I guess Returns, Mythic Quest. It's a show that I've been waiting to come back and really kind of find its way again. I think we'll see Silo as well. The return of Ted Lasso, the return of the morning show For All Mankind. Need I Go On? Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's just so much happening on the service now, and all we really have dates for is the first few months, and that alone is so exciting. So I can't even imagine what the rest of the year is going to be like. So much to look forward to in 2025. I think it's going to be an epic year for Apple Originals.
Now, in terms of films, two other films that were mentioned recently in the press to keep your eyes on. The Last Bus. This is Matthew McConaughey's first lead role in 6 years as a down-on-his-luck bus driver trying to ferry 22 kids to safety in the middle of California's biggest forest fire. Whilst it's based on a true story and it co-stars America Ferrera, it's directed by Paul Greengrass, which I'm really, really excited for, because I think the last film I saw of his, and probably the last that he made, was The Newsroom, and I'm kind of looking to see him go back to his roots. This seems to be doing that in what's being described as an edge-of-your-seat thriller about contemporary world events. and has also been called Speed in the Age of Global Warming, which I love that description because I loved Speed. The other film, though, is a remake, and it's a remake of a film that I recommended to you, I think on the last episode even, as well, from the Kira Kurosawa, High and Low. This is Highest and Lowest. What do you know about this one, Devon?
I know it's directed by Spike Lee. I know it stars Denzel Washington and Jeffrey Wright. Those three names alone have me very excited. I also know that before this film comes out, before we get a date for it, I really need to watch the original, so I have some context. Yes. That may be what you were getting at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's everything to look forward to, but of course, there's always films and TV shows, either in production or in development, shows that no doubt we will see by the end of 2025, at least in some cases. Where do we want to start, Devon?
Let's start with two names that I think listeners will probably recognize and be excited about. Oscar Isaac and Ana de Armas are set to star in upcoming Apple original drama series Bananas, created by Carolina Pais. The series will be directed by David O. Russell, marking his TV series directorial debut, and the crime-led plot is currently under wraps, so we don't know more than that, but show called Bananas with that cast and crew, I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I believe this is to do with like South America and that region, and that's what Bananas is in reference to, the Banana Republic. So, yeah, very, very cool there. Apple's also secured the rights to Elliot Ackerman's upcoming novel Sheepdogs, with Tom Hanks and Gary Goetzman on board to develop it as a series. The book, due to release this August, is described as an action-packed spy thriller that follows an ex-CIA operative and a former pilot as they travel the globe on a mission to repossess a private jet stranded on a remote African airfield. Devon, I'm calling 2025 the year of the book club.
We've got some reading to do between Sheepdogs and the follow-up to The Last Thing He Told Me. Lots of upcoming books that are going to be turned into Apple Originals. Again, got to have that context. We've got some reading to do. In terms of casting, Joseph Lee, whom listeners will recognize from Beef, is going to join Callum Turner and Brianna Middleton in Apple Original science fiction series Neuromancer. And this is a fun one that I learned from Reese Witherspoon's Instagram account. Rita Wilson has joined the cast of The Last Thing He Told Me Season 2. So it looks like they're having a lot of fun on that set, Sigmund. And I love these just kind of random announcements that Reese is posting. I love her strategy for promoting her shows and getting the news out.
Absolutely. Yep. Case of DIY there, which I love. In other news, former Sky executive Catherine Lees has joined Apple TV Plus as director of the international video team, which is very, very cool. I think one of the strongest segments of the service is the international content rollout. Really spearheaded initially by documentaries, but really moved into drama. And we've got, I think the end of last year was really fantastic when it came to international drama and comedy. The beginning of this year continues to do that. So looking very, very promising. And we're going to see the same strategy be bolstered now. Very, very cool.
In awards news, we've had several awards nominations come out recently, starting with the American Cinema Editors Eddie Award nominations, with Steve getting nominated for Best Edited Documentary Series, not once, but twice, both parts of the Steve Martin documentary. Very cool. Slow Horses was nominated for Best Edited Drama Series, and Disclaimer was nominated for Best Edited Limited Series. Those winners will be announced very soon on January 18th.
Coming slightly later on February 12th is the Makeup Artists and Hairstylists Guild Awards, and nominations were seen for Palm Royale for Best Period and or Character Makeup and Best Period and or Character Hairstyling. We'll find out whether Palm Royale was victorious or not. And to round up this week's Apple FYC announcements, The kids and family team at Apple TV Plus must have been having a ball when they heard the announcements for the Children's and Family Emmy Award nominations. 29 awards in all, Devon.
Yeah, it's really incredible, the number of nominations for a vast array of Apple originals. Really speaks to the amazing work that team's been doing. Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock got 10 nominations. Velveteen Rabbit got 6. Jane got 3. Frog and Toad also got 3, as well as nominations for Lovely Little Farm, Interrupting Chicken, Curses, Snoopy Presents One of a Kind Marcy, Welcome Home Franklin, and Shape Islands. Congratulations to all those nominees. Winners for those will be announced on March 15th.
Now, one early highlight for me this year has been the Golden Globes, not for necessarily those who won the awards at the Golden Globes, but for the opening monologue from presenter Nikki Glaser this year. Check it out on YouTube. But when it comes to Apple TV releases, well, there's a fair bit that has been on my radar since we last spoke, Devon. Apple Immersive Adventure Ice Dive. Let me just say, I thought this was incredible. And I was so happy to be near a heater during this whole thing, because otherwise it would have been quite the ordeal. Such bravery, such, I don't know, single-mindedness, just out of this world. And to be able to go on these different expeditions, this is something I'd never want to experience in real life. This is probably the first experience in immersive where I was like, do I really want to jump into this? Where, I had a little bit of hesitation going in, but wow, absolutely incredible. And something we've talked about previously with the different immersive experiences so far on Apple Immersive Video and Apple Vision Pro is that because this was made by Atlantic Productions in conjunction with Apple Video Programming LLC, we did actually see who was involved. This was directed by Charlotte Mickelberg, with the EP being Anthony Geffen, and they're capturing this free diver, Ant Williams, who's trying to obtain a new world record diving under the ice. Crazy. Absolute craziness, but very, very cool in more ways than one.
I was so cold watching this. I was in my cold office and didn't have the heater turned up. I was freezing and I was so stressed out. You have to assume that if something terrible happened, they just wouldn't release the video. But, the whole time you're like, this guy is doing something that just, I can't even fathom. First of all, just being there. I wouldn't even want to be there unless I had like 6 layers on, right? But he's stripping down to a wetsuit, getting in the water under the ice. And it was cool also seeing all the safety precautions in place for this sport, which is great to see. And Johnny Sussex, who was coaching Ant and encouraging him professionally, he talked about an experience where someone that he knew actually ended up passing away doing this sport, and why that inspired him to be a safety coordinator and really make sure that these kinds of things are well watched over. But yeah, this was, of all the Apple Immersive videos that I've watched, this one got my heart racing the most, which says something because a lot of them do, but this was worse than heights. This was worse than swimming with sharks. This really just, it gave me some anxiety that, of course, by the end, you're leaving not quite so wound up.
I woke up at 2 a.m. to watch this because I wanted to watch it as soon as it was released, and I couldn't get to sleep afterwards.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. But I think the thing I walked away with most from it was just being inspired. Something Ant says at the end of the video, he says, bravery begins with belief that you have the ability to cope with whatever comes your way. And I found that very inspiring. I put that in my journal so that I can revisit that quote over time, because seeing him do something like that, it's like, okay, I can accomplish the things that are in my way as well. Speaking of accomplishments, these don't matter quite as much, but you and I both chase the leaderboards on Apple Arcade, and we've got a whole new slew of Apple Arcade releases coming tomorrow. including Skate City, New York, Gears and Goo on the Apple Vision Pro, Three Kingdoms Heroes, Final Fantasy Plus, Trials of Mana Plus, Rodeo Stampede Plus, and most intriguing to me, it's literally just Mowing Plus. You gotta love a video game that just makes you work, right?
Yeah, and strangely, this is the one that's like top on my list to download first. I want to get into Final Fantasy. I never have been able to. Maybe this is my chance, but I just got a funny feeling it's literally just mowing's going to take all of my time.
We'll have to compete on how many yards we can mow, I guess. Friday sees the penultimate episode of Silo Season 2, nearing the midpoint of the series, but we've got 2 more seasons to look forward to, so don't fret. Very much looking forward to seeing how they wind up Season 2. Of course, we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. On Sunday, we have the 30th Annual Critics' Choice Awards airing on E!, available the next day on Peacock for you streamers. So if you want to check out the Critics' Choice Awards, see who wins, that'll be Sunday on E! Lots of extras this week because we have been off for a little bit and we didn't want anyone to miss out on some of these cool things because there's a lot of different Apple originals covered, but they're all great. First off, Malala was on Apple News in Conversation discussing Bread and Roses and what's going on in Afghanistan. Great conversation going deeper on not only the Apple original, but also just the work that's going on there. For Bad Sisters fans, we have Extending Worlds, the 40-foot in Ireland coast. Some behind the scenes of filming out in Ireland, which of course is just gorgeous, and lots of water scenes, of course, in Bad Sisters, which we love. For Slow Horses, we have Jackson Lamb Arrives Unannounced. This is a scene read. It's a really interesting concept. I don't know that we've seen one of these before, but it's just the scene from the show, but interspersed with it is the text of the script. So you can kind of see how the actors and director are translating that into what we see on screen, which, it's a cool exercise for people who are interested in that kind of thing. And then we have Reconstructing the Blitz production design. Again, just more behind the scenes learning about that film in particular, I think as a period piece and the scale of it. There's just so much content there for learning about how they rebuilt that world, and it's all fascinating.
Yeah, I wish that we had like extended versions of all of these. I wish there was a mode on Apple TV Plus where I could watch the script all the way through, or click a button and see picture in picture, the production design of this particular scene. And that would be so, so cool. But this is very, very cool for now. We also got extras for Fly Me to the Moon, which I think did gangbusters over the holidays in terms of viewing figures, which was a surprise to me. That said, the highlight of the film for me is the comical Lance Vespertin, who explains it all in his very comedic way. We also saw Jim Rash react to Out of This World pickup lines. Strange feature, but it works. For Silo fans, Hugh Howey and Graham Yost were on a Reddit AMA this past weekend, which was very, very cool. Learn a lot there. And of course, for everyone excited for the return of Lumen Industries and the severed employees of Severance, the Severance podcast with Ben Stiller and Adam Scott is now available with its first 2 episodes. So check that out after listening to us. And finally, a film that we've talked about quite a bit, considering it's not an Apple original. I was surprised how much we talked about it. Technically, just incredible across the board. And the reason we're talking about Wicked once again, and director John M. Chu, is because, a certain Apple Vision Pro was used within the production phase of the film, which just shows how quickly also this film turned around.
Yeah, I think Apple mentioned this maybe at WWDC, that he was using it for special effects and giving feedback on as the film was being finished. But yeah, that is quite a timetable. But this is a cool little video of him just kind of sharing how he was using it and the impact that Apple Vision Pro had on that process, which, it's making a little bit of a splash in Hollywood already, which is great to see. So those are all the extras we wanted to catch you up on over the holiday break. But of course, also while we were away, we saw the season 2 finale of Shrinking, an Apple original that I've been really looking forward to discussing with you, Sigmund. Now, just a warning, we will be covering spoilers of the plot of Season 2 of Shrinking, so if you haven't yet finished it, go ahead and skip this chapter and come back once you've watched it. I do hope you will watch it, because it's well worth a watch, but I'm very much looking forward to discussing this with you, Sigmund.
So am I. Of course, Season 2 sees Jimmy struggling to grieve the loss of his wife whilst being a dad, friend, and therapist. And he decides to try a new approach with everyone in his path, unfiltered, brutal honesty. But will it make things better, or will it unleash uproarious chaos? Well, we found out over the course of 12 episodes.
I think we're all on a hot streak.
You're wearing your sex boxes at work for, you little freak.
Dress for the job you want.
This is why I hate to come out of my office. It's not your patient's job to heal you.
Well, maybe I don't have enough boundaries. But we should be working together, like Batman and Robin. You already sound like him.
I'm gonna make you pay for that.
That's exactly what Batman would say.
Shrinking is, of course, created by Jason Segel, Bill Lawrence, and Brett Goldstein, who also stars in the second season, alongside Jason Segel, Harrison Ford, Jessica Williams, Luke Tenney, Michael Urie, Lukita Maxwell, Krista Miller, and others. I just want to say from the top here how much this series, especially the second season, really warmed my heart, but made me think about so much, not only through the portrayals of all of these characters who I love to bits in very different ways and have actually felt very much like adopted family members at this point, and some of them are very much adopted family members to one another, and that really translates outside of the screen to everyone that's watched, and that I've spoken to, at least. This season was a really interesting one in the sense that normally when I read synopsis for second seasons and it's like, okay, we're revisiting this troubled character and he's got a different way in which he's going to go about things, and it doesn't normally end up being that because they haven't written the character well enough to be able to progress despite all of the issues that may be going on with them. This is not the case here. The writing of this show is incredible, and I would imagine that is also why the performances are just as much, especially when it comes to Jimmy. We left him in season 1 really still trying to come to terms with the death of his wife. He's starting to reconnect with his friends, but there is still that tension, not just with his friends, but with his daughter. It's still simmering somewhat, but he's just getting to the point of making the right decisions, even when he's not with his patients. That progress through Jimmy allows other characters to breathe and redefine themselves as well.
Yeah, I think to me, that's what stuck out to me most about this season. Even starting with the first promotion, the teaser, with everyone on the bench, and Jimmy loses his seat to Paul, which is just so great. But this show, while it is about Jimmy, it's really about this sort of chosen family that these people have formed throughout this traumatic event in so many of their lives, and the way they've come together and kind of healed through it. And I love Jimmy's journey this season. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in our discussion, but I loved all the other stories around it and just the way the people around Jimmy interact and grow as well. I feel like this season had so many just incredible storylines and growth journeys that were well worth following. And to me, the one that sticks out the most is probably Paul, played by Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
This in season 1, he was kind of just the grumpy old man who, he had his moments, but he was mostly just there to point out all the ways that Jimmy was going wrong. And, I just didn't feel like there was a lot of warmth on his end in the first season. The second season, we really get to see him grow as he comes to terms not only with his diagnosis with Parkinson's, but also with what that's going to look like for him in the future as it progresses, and how it's going to affect his relationships with the people around him. And I just love the way they integrated him so well into that chosen family this season. It really felt like he grew in a lot of ways with so many different characters. There was a flashback this season where we saw where everyone was before the inciting incidents of the show. And it was jarring to me, kind of like how disjointed people were, especially Paul. He was so removed from the group. But then they also introduced this incredible joke that came up so many times, "My bad," that I love that they used the flashback to introduce that and then use that so many more times. But Paul just, I think he embraces a vulnerability this season that we haven't seen him do before. He chooses to be in a relationship with people when it's hard and when he doesn't know his own future, so he can't predict the future of this relationship. And in the final episode, the line that he said that stuck with me, that just continues to ring in my ears, he says, "I'm leaning on you." He's learning to need other people in a way he hasn't ever allowed himself to before, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think Harrison Ford's performance in this has gone to another level. It almost felt like, and I'm sure Harrison Ford would say, no, what are you talking about? But it almost felt like he allowed himself to be comfortable in this role this second season. Or maybe it's us that allowed ourselves to see Harrison Ford in a different way after a number of hours on screen with the first season. I love the vulnerability of everyone in this. We were talking pre-podcast recording about the different characters and where they are and the different things they had to deal with. What I thought was quite refreshing was Luke Tenney's Sean, who the first couple of episodes, you're like, okay, he's progressing and he's getting it figured out, but there is this thing in the background that's still holding him back, and that is the relationship with his father. And I thought, oh, is this going to be like a deep kind of expose of a father-son relationship gone wrong? And I wondered if it was going to retread old grounds that we'd already seen in the first season. What ends up happening is Sean ends up giving advice to the people that he was seeking advice from, right? And he was able to figure it out with his dad and kind of stop leaning so much on his adopted family, so to speak, right? And on the people that were there for him, just didn't really know how to show it, and didn't know how to deal with the issues that he was having. So I thought that was a really beautiful progression for Sean's character. I love his relationship with Jimmy, and the fact that even when Jimmy's daughter, Alice, is having issues where she's had a rap made about her, they're like secretly saying, you know what, this is actually quite a good track. That was a standout moment for me. I think in terms of, and there are loads of cool things going on here, right? You've got Brian, played by Michael Urie, who is going through this anxiety of, oh wow, fatherhood is coming up, or at least I might have the ability to do it. I'm scared. Am I ready? And I see you smiling, Devon. Obviously I don't have first-hand experience of this, but I think the answer is you're never ready, right?
Yeah, you never are, but seeing that journey of someone considering it, going through the highs and lows, I actually really loved the moment when he and his partner decided not to have a baby in that moment and the relief that they had, but then how that was kind of the breakaway towards them actually getting ready. It is that kind of roller coaster, and I love seeing that portrayed on screen. I love Michael Urie. I think he's hilarious, and the way he sang a song every scene that he walked into and said, oh, that's just the music that plays in my head when I walk in a room. I thought that was perfect. I don't have the confidence, but I wish I did, because that was just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, lots of great performances, right? Jessica Williams, Gabby, and her relationship with her new man, played by Damon Wayans Jr., who's fantastic in this, and of course that all comes about due to a little bit of matchmaking from Derek, who actually became my favorite character. Ted McGinley, really an interesting portrayal because he is quite reserved and he is quite detached, I'd say, a little bit distant from his long-time love, Liz, played by Kristen Miller. And Liz is kind of going through her own things in the sense of she's always been there to really push people forward in her own way and allowed people around her to be messy. And I think as much as on my initial thought on where her character's trajectory goes this season, which I didn't really like on first thought, I thought it was quite clever in the sense that it allowed her to have that freedom to be a bit of a mess and make the wrong choices for once, right? Whereas, when we're first introduced to her in season 1, she's picking up the pieces and trying to hide some of the truths of Jimmy's current spiraling,
Yeah, Liz and Derek are such an interesting couple, and I loved their dynamic in season 1. I just, the way Derek everything bounces off of him, and, he just does everything with a smile. I thought that was great, but I also love the progression they have in season 2 between those two, where, their kids are out of the house. Alice is doing well and no longer really, relying on them to the extent that she was before. And so, Liz is kind of seeking something to pour herself into. And Derek, his aloofness in the relationship that has worked so well throughout, the past 20 odd years, suddenly becomes a major issue when he doesn't recognize the issues that she's facing. And like you said, she ends up, making some poor decisions and hurting him. But I also thought their reconciliation was beautiful in the way they helped get Liz back on track and find some purpose, but also reestablish that relationship she has with Derek, where she's not the doting, super considerate wife. That's just not the dynamic that they have. And the way they kind of get back to Derek has to spend the day looking for scissors because he's afraid to ask Liz where they are. I love that dynamic. I think it works so well for them, and seeing them talk through their issues, come to a healthier place, but reestablish what works for them. I think that was really cool to see. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Derek he was one of my favorite characters last season for the comedic element, but I think they really developed him into a more of an emotional kind of anchor point during the season in a way that was really effective.
I think, kind of going back to what we're talking about with regard to adopted families, there is a pivotal moment in this season where, of course, Alice and Brian are meeting with Brett Goldstein's character, Lewis, who, of course, Jimmy isn't a fan of and really doesn't want Alice interacting with after he finds out that she continues to do so. And there is this moment where they're all laughing and vibing at a restaurant, and Jimmy walks past, and there's that kind of betrayal. And I think there's an element of that safety that he thought was there isn't there, and people make their own decisions. I thought that was really, really powerful and kind of heartbreaking initially, because I've lost someone in a similar way, and I understood the betrayal that he was feeling. What I think I love about this season in particular is how, because he's moved on a little bit, it's allowed for other people to move on and make their decisions with more confidence. Alice, I would almost say in the first season, she she was portrayed more like an adult in the first season than she is in the second season. She makes really thoughtful decisions based on what her mum would wish for and trying to keep that spirit alive. But she's also allowed to be a teenager. She turns 18 in this, and she's more of a teenager now because she's not having to act as the babysitter for Jimmy this time around. And I think that is a beautiful, pivotal moment in this story, which, of course, takes or could take a dark turn. It doesn't turn out that way in the end.
Yeah, thankfully, kind of all the setups that give you that tension, thinking that things are going to take a really dark turn, turn out to go the other way. But there's just enough of that tension there to know what the stakes are, and for the payoff to really be there when the characters make the right decision. That really does start with Alice and her discovery of Lewis. Of course, that has to be a complex feeling, seeing the person who inadvertently took the life of your mother through a poor decision. And Lewis's portrayal as well, I think, is really complex this season. You hear about drunk driving and people dying in those sorts of incidents, and you have this picture of someone going out to a bar and just being stupid and getting behind the wheel of a car when they certainly shouldn't have. But you actually see the decisions in Lewis's life that led up to that night, and also the impact of it. The theme of the season is forgiveness. It's not that what you did was okay, obviously, or that there weren't impacts that continue to be felt throughout these people's lives. But that reconciliation between Alice and Lewis, I thought, was really beautiful. Showed her maturity, but like you said, in the sense of her also getting to be a teenager and make some poor decisions and own up to some of the things that she did as well, especially when it comes to her relationship with her friend Summer. But I think her maturity in choosing to forgive Lewis, to recognize the impact that this event has had on his life as well, to recognize that he needs that chosen family as well. And he's kind of lost everything as a result of what he did. Choosing to reach out in a situation where you could turn away and maybe even relish in their suffering. I feel like that was really mature of her. And I think she kind of gets to be the example for Jimmy throughout the season. He's got a lot going on. He's trying to help his patients. He's got Grace in prison at the beginning of the season, by the way, which that storyline actually wraps up really quickly, which is interesting. But ultimately, he tells Lewis that he forgives him, but he also says, I don't want you in my life. It's kind of like it's a form of forgiveness in the sense of like, I want you out of my mind and I don't want you involved with my family, which again, understandable. But basically I believe through Alice's example, kind of take that turn to where he does actually learn to care for Lewis in an odd way. And in the finale, there's that moment where, Lewis, you think he might be taking his life because again, he doesn't have anybody, and he's even at this point lost his relationship with Alice, and Jimmy gets to be the one to show up and show that grace to him that he really needed in that moment. I thought that was beautiful. You'd never want to prescribe how someone should act because, every experience is different, and I would never tell anybody who's been through a traumatic experience like that they need to forgive that person or have any kind of relationship with that person. But I think seeing it portrayed this way, this one example of how it could go, I find it very inspiring and satisfying in a way that I think fits so well with Jimmy's journey of forgiveness throughout the season.
I will say the one horrific moment for me in that final episode leading up to that moment was everyone just piling their iPhones into a basket. No screen protection, just everything scraping amongst one another. And seriously, there was a moment where I was like, will someone please read the messages? Because I think we either know someone that's been in a situation like that where they've desperately just needed someone, or we've been in a position like that ourselves, and you yearn for someone to make contact. And yeah, that final scene is incredibly touching. And yeah, just honestly, this whole season just so beautifully devised. It's a season I've watched through now 3 times. It really has the balance down, I think, between something that you can watch easily but also gains something, some kind of wisdom from each 30-minute episode. So yeah, loved it. Cannot wait for season 3. And yes, it's already been confirmed there will be a season 3. So
yes,
very, very excited. And hopefully many more seasons to come, right?
Yeah, Bill Lawrence has mentioned, season 3 is kind of the end of the initial arc that they had imagined, but they're open to doing more seasons if that's something that works out. Looking forward to more Brett Goldstein in season 3, and something we didn't get to talk about, I'm looking forward to more, hopefully, Kobe Smulders in season 3. That Hemming reunion was an awesome scene in season 2. I think she's a great character for that world, and maybe we'll get to see Jimmy have a little bit of a love life in season 3. I'd love to see it.
I think the standout was the portrayal of Paul from Harrison Ford. I do wonder if that is the story arc that they're trying to tell within the 3 seasons, and then we move forward. If so, it will be a sad moment for sure. But yeah, very, very much looking forward to it, and yeah, absolutely fantastic. Of course, both seasons of Shrinking now available to stream in full on Apple TV Plus. And if you haven't begun already, what are you doing? Get to it. TV app highlights now. Get ready for Flow. This is now available on premium VOD in the TV app. It's from the boundless imagination of the award-winning filmmaker Gint Zilberdalis, and comes a thrilling animated spectacle as well as a profound meditation on the fragility of the environment and the spirit of friendship and community. This is an animated film with a real distinct animation style to it, looking to do pretty well when it comes to award season this year, so definitely one to put on your list. And then tomorrow, The Traitors season 3 on Peacock. This is the US version, but the original UK version began on BBC iPlayer on New Year's Day, and I've been watching it the last few days, catching up. Very, very cool there. So a couple of TV app highlights to kick in 2025, alongside, of course, all of the old episodes of Raw and SmackDown and everything else on Netflix now, the new home for WWE. In Europe, on Netflix, everything is available from WWE there, and it's mainly ad-free. In the US, of course, the premium live events are still going to be on Peacock. I think SmackDown is on the US network. It's everywhere. But for the Europeans listening, if you're a WWE fan, that Netflix subscription, as hefty as it is per month, you might see more value on it if you're a fan of pro wrestling. So I am, and I said I wasn't going to do it, Devon, but I've resubscribed.
I think that's fair and probably totally what they were going for.
Now, one person that was in the audience of WWE this week, the premiere of Monday Night Raw on Netflix, was Macaulay Culkin, and the other sat somewhere else in the stadium was Kieran Culkin, of course, one of the stars of A Real Pain, which did really well at the Golden Globes last weekend. It also just so happens to be The Gift I gave you in the TV app over the holidays. We're going to talk about The Gift that you got me next week with a little recap. But tell us about A Real Pain. What did you think?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you again for the kind gift. Very much appreciate it. And this was an awesome Christmas gift that you gave me. I'll say I really enjoyed the film. It was a wonderful way to spend 90 minutes. If I had to very succinctly round up the kind of the vibe I got from it. It's very calm and understated while also taking you on an emotional journey, which I really appreciated. So it's written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, stars Jesse Eisenberg and, as you mentioned, Kieran Culkin as cousins who travel to Poland to honor their recently deceased grandmother. And you pick up pretty quickly as the film starts that the tension in this movie is going to lie in the vastly different personalities of these two cousins who basically grew up as brothers and then kind of grew apart as they got older. But Davey, played by Jesse Eisenberg, is very type A. He's anxious in a subdued way, and he's constantly worried about his cousin. I very much resonated with Davey in this movie. I saw a lot of myself in him. Benji, played by Kieran Culkin, is a laid-back, free spirit, but he has this biting critical side that could come out at any moment if you strike him the wrong way. And you kind of see it again through these like micro interactions that they have. It's nothing like, it's not explosive, but just these little conversations that they have, and you see these elements of their personalities. The movie opens up with Davey just calling Benji over and over and over, trying to get him to pick up the phone to make sure he's not going to miss the flight. You know, and again, that just tells you so much about the relationship from the very get-go. And I'll say they both did an excellent job portraying these characters. I think they kind of fit what you'd expect from these two actors. Jesse Eisenberg, not quite neurotic, but anxious kind of vibe. I think he gives off very well. And then Kieran Culkin, just that laid back kind of, you know, just the cool cousin, right? Just along for the ride kind of thing. By the way, Kieran Culkin, I saw a joke going around about his Golden Globes win. You know, people do goofy stuff like this. They put, you know, Golden Globe winning Kieran Culkin on social media, but then the picture in the post is of him from Home Alone when he was a child, and he's playing Fuller, and you know, he's got the Pepsi and the glasses. Anyway, I just love that dynamic of him showing up on his brother's film, and you know, just playing the kind of the chaotic cousin, which again he kind of brings back to this movie as well. There's a rich history between these two cousins that we progressively learn about throughout the film, and you know, like any relationship with family, it has its ups and downs. There's the positives and the negatives. They both love and envy each other in different ways that lead to these small conflicts between them. And I'll say that as they're going on this trip to Poland, they're with a tour group, and I felt terrible throughout the movie for the other people on their tour group because, you know, these people, they're all from, you know, different backgrounds that have their own reasons for going to Poland to revisit the history, especially around World War II, and the Holocaust was a big focus of the tour, but also, of course, life before as well, kind of celebrating the culture there. But they have this tour guide named James, played by Will Sharp, who has to take the brunt of Benji's feedback on the tour, and sometimes it gets a little unhinged. And so these two cousins are kind of squabbling throughout the tour, and they're on this tour with all these other people. So, I just kind of felt for them throughout. But it's never in a way that you dislike either of the cousins, I would say. You can snicker at it and feel bad for them, and again feel bad for the people on their tour, but they're both likable and redeemable characters, I would say. As these two are going on their tour throughout Poland, they have to contend with their feelings about their grandmother's recent passing, as well as the horrific experiences that she went through in World War II Poland, and how that generational trauma impacts them. So it's kind of playing out on two levels. It's the relationship between the two of them, like their family history, but also, of course, their relationship with their grandmother, the stories that she passed down, understanding what she went through, and also seeing firsthand, you know, that they visit a concentration camp, and we get some very respectful and quiet scenes there that really, you know, touched me and left an impact on me. So again, this film, I was waiting for the major blow up between the cousins. I was trying to anticipate the conflict, but that's not what the film's about, right? And you see that as it goes on. It's more of an emotional exploration of these lives that are quite unlike my own, that left me feeling richer and more informed about how so many people experience the world. I don't have that heritage or experience personally. It's not something that I can experience firsthand, but this is what I love about film, right? Is that it lets you experience the world from someone else's eyes, and not only one person, but these two very different people who are contending with this same history. And yeah, it was a beautiful film. Again, 90 minutes, didn't waste any time, no filler or anything like that. And again, and not relying on any sort of like just over the top drama, just these two characters going through this thing, and you get to see it through their eyes and learn from their experience, which I loved.
Yeah, I mean, this was a film that I got to see early on. It's now in UK cinemas, so if you're in the UK, do go and check it out. But it's a film that explored something that I could never quite pinpoint for myself in terms of my relationship to what my grandmother and ancestors that I never got to meet went through. And I could never quite pinpoint what I was feeling, because I was feeling detached but also connected to those situations. And I didn't know that what I was experiencing was my own kind of sense of trauma and guilt, in a sense, because I'm living a free, happy life in relation to what they went through, and am I doing enough with my life, having that freedom? There are all those things I had never really kind of thought in terms of how to explore before. And this film was quite a wake-up call. It was a bit of a slap in the face. I was laughing one moment, absolutely in floods of tears the next. There's a particular moment where they go and visit one of the concentration camps, and all there are shoes of the people that, was sent to die. I think some of the betrayal of that grief, but if not all of the betrayal of that grief on screen, is genuine. And there is very much a fly on the wall documentary type vibe to this. And then you have the craziness of, getting off the train at the wrong time, and how are we gonna get back to the group? And it's just a fantastic film, and it was my number one film of last year, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed it as well, Devon.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you sharing it with me and giving me an opportunity to get a glimpse into that experience in a way that I never had before. I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend everyone check it out, whether in theaters or renting it in the TV app or however you see it. I highly recommend going to see it.
Very, very cool. Let's end this first episode on a lighter note. Our up next picks. We've got two. I'm going to go with my up next pick because it's available in the TV app. It's a fairly new release. So it could have been a TV app highlight, but it's been elevated to an up next pick. And that is a soundtrack to Coup d'etat on Premium VOD. In 1960, the United Nations, the Global South, ignites a political earthquake. Musicians Abbey Lincoln and Max Roach crash the Security Council. Nikita Khrushchev bangs his shoe, denouncing America's color bar, while the US dispatches jazz ambassador Louis Armstrong to the Congo to deflect attention from its first African post-colonial coup. This is an incredible documentary. I highly recommend that everyone checks it out and gets informed. And the music in this is outstanding as well. And yeah, it just covers another part of, recent history, 1960. Not that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. And it's a recent history that needs to be explored. Just absolutely incredible. Soundtrack to Coup d'etat.
Well, that sounds fascinating. And I promise we will end on a lighter note at some point. But first, I have an up next pick that probably is going to strike some tension and anxiety for some listeners. That is Squid Game Season 2 on Netflix. I watched it over the break. This is not the kind of show I normally watch. I don't love, super violent type things. And this is not even a show I would say I enjoy. The series takes place in Korea, and it's about these people who get basically abducted to this island where they have to play children's games, and if they lose, they lose their lives, and they're playing for a very large amount of money. And there's all these social dynamics that go into, they all need the money, right? But they're also all risking their lives. And so there's this huge tension there between what's going on and whether they want to stay. And anyway, the show is horrifying and very alarming in so many ways, but it's also a huge global hit for a lot of reasons because it taps into a part of your brain that you don't spend a lot of time in. It's that fight or flight feeling. You have that the entire time you're watching the show because you're just picturing yourself in these situations, watching these people make these impossible decisions, and you're having to imagine what you would do. And obviously, thankfully, we're watching from the safety of our homes and not in a situation like this, and pray that none of us ever are. It's fascinating. And the show, I think it was meant to be a one-off. I don't think it was intended to be a multi-season show, and it just kind of blew up on Netflix. It was made in Korea, but just went viral internationally, and to the point that it was so successful, they ordered 2 more seasons. And I'd say season 2 is more of a, part 1 to the second half of the show. Season 1 really wrapped up in a way that was very satisfying. Season 2 is definitely set up for season 3. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I watched it over the break, and as long as you know what you're getting into and you're comfortable with it, I recommend checking it out on Netflix.
I mean, that's what I wanted to ask, right? So I surprisingly have not seen the show at all. I've seen a clip of the show, which is like a red light, green light thing where you have to pause, and if you don't pause in time, you die. There's pretty strict rules on this game show, and a weird take on what is, a children's playground game. And there was something about it that just really unnerved me. And this is from someone that was talking about Terrifier 3 just the other week. But yeah, there is something about this that's just made me not jump into it yet. I think it might be the social dynamics involved and social class and class systems. And it was just something that made me feel a little bit uneasy about it. But I've heard fantastic things about this from everyone that's seen it. So, Squid Games. What is the happy note we're going to end on, Devon?
Okay, happy note, quick one. This one's Disney Plus, a series I really enjoyed over the break. It's What If Season 3, animated series that takes place within the Marvel multiverse. It's characters that you know, but in very, very different situations. What this show does every season somehow is create a new character, not from the comics, not from the films, an original character for the show that I just adore, and just really, really hope that they somehow bring these characters over into the greater Marvel universe. Last season, they had a character named Cohorty, who I just adored, and really a lot of people online were just really excited about. This season, there's a character named Birdie, played by Natasha Lyonne. Really excited for the future of the Marvel universe if these characters make it into it, and just a fun kind of different take on characters that you know and love. This is the last season. It does wrap up, and if you're a Marvel fan and interested in seeing those characters in kind of different scenarios, check out What If on Disney Plus. There's 3 seasons. Well, that's it from us in our first episode of 2025. Of course, we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us at the beginning of this year. We love talking about Apple TV and the world of Apple TV with you every week, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you have thoughts on anything we've discussed, you have recommendations for things that we should watch and talk about, be sure to send those to us. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes. You can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We would love to hear from you.
We'll, of course, be back next week with the return of Severance. I don't know which version of us is going to show up. Is it going to be the innie version or the outie version? We'll have to wait and see. We'll also be taking a look back at Bad Sisters Season 2, and we'll be highlighting our favourite TVs and display technology, as well as gadgets from this year's CES. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a happy 2025.